Welcome to the Kick It 3v3 Soccer Podcast, where soccer fans, coaches, parents, and players get insights into the beautiful game. Each week, your hosts, Danny Stratford and Brent Zico Ward, bring you some of the latest in soccer news, coaching, parenting, and conversations with guests who are making an impact in their local soccer communities or even around the world. So let's kick it. And now a quick word about one of our partners. Soccer families, we all know that soccer expenses add up. So here's a way to save at home and help your soccer team. We're partnering with SmartWave Solar, serving Colorado and Utah only, because they make going solar simple with 2 quick online meetings and a free, no pressure quote. How do I know? I just recently had my SmartWave solar system installed. I've been looking to add solar to my house for years, but I was tired of the misleading ads and those high pressure, you have to decide today sales tactics. A friend of mine who'd had SmartWave Solar for 2 years and was super happy introduced me to SmartWave just a few months ago. SmartWave didn't use any high pressure tactics. They saved me 40% over the other quotes I got and made sure I received all the tax incentives I was due. And here's the kicker. When you book a meeting with their local rep, Steve, through Kickit, SmartWave will help sponsor your team by covering 50% to 100% of your tournament fees, or provide 3v3 custom Macron uniforms for your next 3v3 tournament. Learn more and book your meeting with Steve at kickitsoccer.com/solar. That's kickitsoccer.com/solar, spelled SOLAR. Make sure you tell them that Dan from Kickit sent you. Tell me about that shirt you got on there, Zico. What's the story with the, I always say it wrong, Schalke? How do we say that?
Schalke 04, they're also called the Royals. They have the 7th or 8th largest crowds in the world weekly. They've actually been struggling in the German second division out of the Bundesliga for 2 years, and it's blown everybody's mind because they're actually a humongous club. Anyway, Schalke sponsored Kick It 3v3 for years. And so these are shirts that we've been giving out to Kick It participants, and wonderful sponsors, because we still have dozens and hundreds and, dare I say, thousands of shirts that we give out. So if you attend one of our events, this is probably a shirt you'll be getting for the next few months. But Schalke, big, huge German club, historic, again, called the Royals. And it actually fits me as I gain a little bit of weight over time. But that's Schalke.
They're good dad bod shirts, as opposed to the Macron jerseys that we get that assume that we are still professional athletes when we wear them.
Correct. So Macron has this Italian cut to them, and the Schalke shirts have this German cut to them. So it's a German small, which means a medium, and so correct. So it hangs perfectly well over my dad bod.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny, and we often don't announce that whether or not we're giving them out at tournaments, because we don't have all the sizes we have for everybody. So sometimes we end up giving a little kid a shirt that's going to be their night shirt for the next year or two. But like I always say, if things go as planned, they will grow into it. So tell me about what your soccer journey. We're going to spend just maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and that won't do it justice. But soccer journey, nickname origins, the briefest version you can, because there's so many potential stories in there that I just love. So I want to hear about your soccer playing journey and nickname origin.
Correct. So I got into soccer when we moved to Brazil in 1973. So I was very, very young. I don't want to tell you exactly how, but I was very, very, very young. And it is the religion in Brazil, right? And so I would say I started playing when we got there. I won't say my age again. Think that I was probably 3 months old. Might have been 3 years. And started playing there, fell in love with the game, became a Flamenguista, a Flamengo fan. Obviously, I adore and am in love with the Seleção, the Brazilian national team. But I actually am from a Canadian mom and an American dad. And so when we moved from Brazil, I was almost 10 years old. And we moved from Brazil, quickly bypassed through the U.S. for about 4 to 6 months. and went up to Canada. And in Canada, I lived in Manitoba, and I'm going to say from 10 to 19, I played on the Big Eddy Cree Reserve, a Pasquet Cree Nation. It's sort of where I played like through 10 to 19 years old. And the funny thing is, they played soccer like bonkers. And I didn't expect to see that when we moved to Canada from Brazil. And so when I was 19, I got a scholarship to come play Division I college soccer in the United States. I came to the United States, and a year after finishing my college soccer in the United States, a friend of mine actually said, "Hey, why don't you coach soccer?" I'm like, "What do you mean coach soccer? Why don't you coach soccer?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean coach soccer? You should just coach like I coach. I coach kids." I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 hold it. You coach kids for a living?" He's like, "Yes, it's my full-time job." What a country. And so, and it's funny, and that's super, super, super brief. I had a couple cups of coffee professionally, but that's super, super brief. That took me into the world of coaching. Although I had been in the world of coaching in Manitoba, that took me into the world of coaching in the United States. And I've coached full-time for a living ever since. That's as brief as I can make it, but that's sort of it. Oh, last thing with the nickname is I love Zico in Brazil. He was the greatest player on the planet back when I was a kid, not only in Brazil, on the planet. And I yapped about him so much in Canada that they sort of, well, dude, enough. And they just jokingly said Zico, which I'm not. And then when I went to college, I yapped so much about Zico that they jokingly said Zico, but I'm not. When I was younger, last thing I'll say is my nickname was actually Bento, which is a funny nickname for a Brazilian Portuguese speaking person, because they have a funny, goofy cartoon named Chico Bento. And so, anyway, I hope that's brief, and that's sort of a little bit of the nickname and talk where I've gotten to this point.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, when you started coaching professionally in Colorado, you were coaching back with Sutton Soccer School back in the day, and they were wanting to come up with a nickname because it's fun for kids, right?
100%.
So Zico became your name, and it's so funny. I don't even think the first couple of years I knew you, I even knew what your first name was, and back in the mid late '90s, and my kids know you as Zico. Your wife calls you Zico.
Correct.
So,
When she says Brent, I'm in trouble. And so, but the funny thing is, of course, it's like, saying, hey, my nickname is Michael Jordan. It's like, come
yeah.
on, what a joke. But I do want her to call me Zico, because when she says Brent, that's bad news. And so I actually went to a very private graduation party of a U.S. military dude. And he was a lean, mean fighting machine. And of his graduating class of 600, he was third or fourth highest. And so he was awarded with this, I think it'd be called a sword. Maybe it was a saber, really long. And it was his family and Beth and I. And so I had coached him when he was 10. Now he's graduating as this, again, lean, mean fighting machine that the U.S. government poured a ton of money into to make him this machine, And, he was the T-3000, Terminator 3000. And he was this. And so I said, in his house, in the Holy of Holies, it's only his family and then Beth and I invited as his old coaches. So it means a lot, right? Because supposedly, I made an impact on his life. Hey, dude, and I won't tell you his name, but hey, man, what's my name? I said, Zico. I'm like, no. What's my real name? Zico. Like, no, man, that's a nickname. So it's funny because you get into the, a Holy of Holies, into the house of this guy that the U.S. government put hundreds of thousands of dollars into. You know what I mean? And he's probably already a top secret, a 007, and he never knew my real name.
That's awesome. Yep. So yeah, no, and that is it's a great story. The only thing I will add, because Zico's too humble to add this, is he was the number one draft out of college the year that he graduated. And it was because, and it was to the CSL, which at the time was arguably the better pro league in North America.
Correct.
Outside of, obviously Mexico has always had a very strong professional
between
league.
Canada and the U.S. Yeah. At
that
moment,
Yeah.
It's right
So it
after
was,
the '86 World Cup, which Canada went to and the U.S. didn't.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's this new upsurge. Correct.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I had the fortune of playing with Zico towards the end of my playing career when we both met in the '90s. All right, so yeah, I'm kind of talk about my soccer background in the same way. So I had a very different upbringing than Zico. I grew up in Kansas City, which we were kind of the unappreciated stepchild of soccer to St. Louis, because St. Louis in the Midwest was where all the great soccer players were coming out of the Midwest back in the day. And in fact, by the time I got to college, if a coach was looking at two players, one of them was from Kansas City and one of them was from St. Louis, he would pick the guy in St. Louis unless the guy in Kansas City was just way better. He had that much of a whatever. So I grew up in the '70s, and the challenging part about growing up in Kansas City in the '70s in soccer is hardly anybody there grown up playing soccer. So the coaches were enthusiastic. Most of them didn't know how to really teach soccer, but they did their best and got us involved in it. And I would say the thing I loved about soccer is I was an ADHD kid who loved running around, and I could play baseball, and I could played all the sports I enjoyed, but baseball just bored me out of my mind because it was so much standing and waiting. Which, if you're diagnosed as ADHD, that's your biggest weakness is standing still and waiting for something amazing to happen, like a ball getting hit to you that once an inning if you're lucky, right?
Batter, batter,
So
batter, swing, and you hope he
yeah,
hits.
geez, exactly. And then when that ball finally comes to you, you better not make a mistake because that's your one chance. And if you make a mistake, you're getting benched or whatever. But I loved all sports, but where soccer really helped me, and I loved basketball too. In fact, I briefly played high school basketball, so it was actually my first love. But I was small for my age, so it was harder for me to compete in basketball, and I wasn't going to be 6'6". I started playing soccer, and back then it was just running around because our coaches didn't even know how to tell us where to go half the time. So I just ran around, got the ball, tried to score, ran around, got the ball, looked for pass, tried to score. And then it wasn't until the late '70s, I want to say, well, probably 1980, 1979, 80, that indoor soccer came to Kansas City, the MISL. And what was awesome about that was that I could go play soccer. I always joked that I played 10 days a week because I would find an indoor match to play once or twice a day at some times of the year. And when you say that, certainly you need mentors and coaches and all of that, but the greatest teacher at the end of the day is the ball. And that accelerated my learning from 13 to 18, 13 years old to 18 years old. And probably every year, the coach would vote me most improved player to the point it became a joke by the end of high school that like Dan's the most improved player. He sucked as a sophomore. Now he's probably the best, one of the best players on our team. To hear comments like that. So that was all due to just playing small-sided soccer for me and it helped me get composure in front of the goal. So that happened. I didn't really have many aspirations of playing even college or pro, but I kind of fell into it. I was a late bloomer. Went into high school at 5'2", came out at 6 foot, but I was still lanky. I was still very much a boy. So I was still developing through college and played for a top 20 JUCO, Johnson County Community College, went down and red-shirted at Missouri Southern State College, which is called Missouri Southern State University there. Come to find out, I actually played a year before there. One of Zico's old buddies, Chris Edwinson, who went there. But and actually, my freshman year, I went to Mid American Nazarene College and got to start as a freshman. And it was great because they had a very kind of new soccer program, not a lot of money into it. But there were three of us on that team that all three actually ended up playing at professional soccer at some level. So we had three really good players and about 12 good athletes that just kind of around us to have a team. And we probably went 50-50 over that time. But, and then I had a short stint. Kansas City Attack came to town when I was, 94, I want to say 24, 25 years old. I had been coaching professionally for a living for a handful of years at that time. And a bunch of people said, hey, you should go try out. And I was like, all right. So I went and tried out. The great thing was one of my heroes, Gino Schiraldi, who, when I was a kid, he was an Italian player, about 5'2", with legs like big tree stumps, and he would get voted defensive player of the year. I'm sorry, of the week. It seemed like every week in the MISL because he was just a solid player. And so I got to play with him for a few months with the Kansas City Attack his first year, and he was one of my heroes. It had been like 10, 12 years ago. So that was really fun. And I remember he gave me a shout out on his radio show years later as a coach. So I felt like he gave me some respect. And I got to play on that team with a lot of great players like Brian Haynes, Peter Hattrip, who were stars in the USL back in the day before there was an MLS. And actually, they did play in the MLS when it first came out. So I got to experience, and playing at that level made me a much better coach because I got to see all my weaknesses, but all the things I wish I had been better at, quicker decisions, better touch. What American uses their instep and the outside of their foot very well? Not many back then, especially. So I had to work on that a lot. And so yeah,
three things.
yeah, yeah, and then I raised five kids who all played competitive soccer. I started my own club in Kansas City, and was one of the first ones to do A teams and B teams, not just only have trying to have an elite team, but have developmental teams. So that was that. And then after a few knee surgeries, blowing out my knee, I was like, I don't think I can just chase kids around the rest of my life. So I went back to school, finished, moved to Denver, got into technology, and that's where I met Zeke. And we coached together. We're kind of kindred spirits. In fact, Zico started one of the programs here in Colorado, which was, we called it Rec Plus. It might have had a different name back then, and my oldest son, Tyler Stratford, was part of that program where we weren't allowed to have competitive teams in Colorado until U11. In some states that's different. But Zico came up with this idea where, well, we'll have they get 2 practices a week. They'll be parent coaches, but we'll have a professional coach like myself or someone like Dan Stratford or whomever go out and work with that coach and coach the coaches, because a lot of coaches, even parents who grew up playing soccer, they remember what it was like to be coached in high school or college if they played at that age, but they don't remember what it was like necessarily, what was needed as a coach, what players need at 6, 7, and 8. So much different than what players need at 13, 14 on up.
100%.
And so there's a real drop off, and we're going to talk a bit about that today when we get to our coaching section. But that's a little bit about us, probably more than a little bit, but we do want to make sure you guys understand. When we bought Kick It Soccer, we were both in love with the game. Zico coaches his kids now. I coached all 5 of my kids in soccer. So that's a little bit about us. Now, the next thing we want to talk about, so we had a fun personal fact with the Zico thing. Here's my fun personal fact. My nickname when I was started coaching, my mentors were some British guys. In fact, a lot of the founders of British soccer camps that's now Challenger were my mentors. I used to coach for them when I wasn't coaching other teams. And in particular, I have to give a shout out to Doug McLagan, one of the best players I ever played with and against. He played professionally as well, higher level than I did, but he was one of my mentor coaches. And they started us out with the 5-year-olds. And he would introduce us to 5-year-old kids as, this is Coach Dan, but you're not allowed to call him Dan. And it'd be a very serious look on these kids' faces. And he'd say, you have to call him Danny Baby. So I became Danny Baby. Doug McLagan was Dougie Baby. There'd be Alan Baby. If Zico there, he'd be Zico Baby. So this became a joke with all these kids. And I cut my teeth on coaching, 5-year-olds. So I have thousands of hours of doing that. And I would literally be playing in a soccer game, and I'd hear in the background some kid yelling, "Mommy, it's Danny Baby." So fast forward, I was managing All American Indoor Sports, and the Kansas City Royals had their batting cages at the back of our facility, and I see Bo Jackson walking by. Bo Jackson was like Deion Sanders, like Michael Jordan. I mean, he was world famous Nike, one of the most amazing baseball players and football players until he got
athlete.
Yeah, and one of the most amazing athletes you ever saw. In fact, there's a video of him, you should look it up, Bo Jackson, grabbing the ball off the warning track in left field and throwing a strike to home plate to catch a guy out who was rounding third and thought for sure he was going to make it. But Bo threw a strike right into the catcher's mitt from the warning track against the wall. So anyway, so he comes walking through, and I'm like, I'm going to go get his autograph. and he was annoyed. And so I'm standing next to Bo. He's about 8 inches taller than me, and I'm 6 foot, so maybe he was only 6 inches, but he was huge. And asked him for his autographs, asked him to make it out to Wanda, my mother-in-law. He said, "Your mother-in-law." I was like, "Yeah, my name's not Wanda." He was a little bit grumpy with me, a little bit irritated. I was asking for my autographs. Meanwhile, this gentleman walks up to me on my left and says, while Bo's standing there, says, "Excuse me, are you Danny, baby?" And I was like, yeah. He said, "Can my son give you a high five?" And so his beautiful wife and his little 5-year-old boy walk up and gives me a high five. And it turns out it's Kevin Seitzer, the Kansas City Royals All-Star third base. And the funniest part of the whole story is Bo Jackson looks at Kevin, looks at me, and just goes, "Danny, baby." Like, who is this guy
That's
that,
hilarious.
that this little kid wanted to give him a high five? Doesn't even care about Bo Jackson, who's standing right next to him, because he's met Bo Jackson 100 times probably, but
Exactly.
so excited to meet Danny, baby. But
That's
that was kind of that was one of my fun favorite stories from back in the day. And I do want to pay that shout out to Doug McLagan. Was probably my favorite mentor coach back then, and I thought one of the best youth soccer coaches, especially that I'd ever met. But really, a lot of those guys with British soccer camps, as much as I like to give Brits a hard time, a lot of them were my mentors. And they weren't about kicking the ball, they were about skills and all that stuff. All right, so the next thing we're going to go on to is World Cup soccer. So there's some interesting things happening with World Cup soccer that we're going to talk about. The first thing we wanted to talk about is the new format. And not that it's still 11v11, right? We still have to deal with some things like instant replay, VAR, but specifically, we wanted to talk about the number of teams that are getting through and what that's going to mean for the teams next summer. And I'll let Zico kind of take it from here.
cool. So there's been a goofy return, sort of, for this upcoming World Cup next summer, 2026. But in 78, it used to be 16 teams. 82, it jumped up to 24 teams. And then 98 or 2002 jumped up to 32 teams. And now next summer, there are going to be 48 teams in the World Cup, 12 groups of 4. At one point, they talked about 16 groups of 3. Don't really understand that. But anyway, 12 groups of 4. And the return is, back when there were 24 teams, the top 2 teams from each group of 4 would make it through. So that's 6 groups of 4, right? The top 2 from each group would go through, so that's 12. And then the top 4 third place teams would go through, so that'd bring it up to 16. And then legitimately from there, it's like the Sweet 16 and the NCAA March Madness, So now they have 48 teams, 12 groups of 4. And so the top 2 teams from each group, right? 12 groups. That's 24 teams make it through. And then the top 8 out of 12 third place teams make it through. So that's what this does. So now it's 24 teams plus the top 8 third place teams. It's 32 teams. So now instead of knockout being starting in like the final 16, it's the final 32 teams. So actually, there's going to be one extra round of do or die knockout. And that's stressful because, I go and I load up on Tums and apple cider vinegar to kill off my month-long stress. And so there's going to be 104 games. That's wonderful. The bummer is there's an extra round of, so sudden death starts with 32 teams instead of 16, which it's typically been. It was 16 back when there were 24 teams. It was 16 last World Cup when there were 32 teams. But now they're starting sudden death or what have you, do or die, with 32 teams left. So it's a different format.
And yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and you and I, with our background, we have different reasons to be stressed about the World Cup. Yours is kind of like me, as I'm from Kansas City, so being a Chiefs fan. Our stress this year is, will we win the Super Bowl or not? If we don't win the Super Bowl, it's a failure. in Kansas City,
No.
which that's only been a phenomenon for 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
But since the 60s, dare I say the 50s, the Brazilians expect to win the World Cup every time they go into it. So as much as New England had a run, as much as the USA had I'm sorry, that Kansas City had a run in NFL football, and people think that they expect to win the Super Bowl, doesn't compare to how much a Brazilian feels shame when they don't win the World Cup championship. It's
100%.
yeah, yeah,
Sometimes something that's so horrible today lights fire for something great in the future, let's say. So you said, dare I say, the 50s. Brazil won the World Cup, the first one for them, in 58, with Pele at 17, obviously the dominant player in soccer history, really. But in 1950, when Pele was 9, Brazil lost the World Cup final at home, and it wasn't officially called a final, but it was. They lost the World Cup final at home when Pele was 9, listening to it on the radio. And his dad, who was a former great soccer player too, Donjinho, Pele said, I've never seen my dad break down and cry like that. So when Pele was 9, he saw his dad crying in front of the radio, and Brazil were in shock because they were, quote unquote, much better and favored to beat Uruguay, which is sort of funny, or at least in their own heads they were. And they lost 2-1 to Uruguay. And So that kicked it off in 1950, let's say. And then when Pele was 17, Pele promises that, Dad, I'll win a World Cup for you. Then when Pele was 17, 8 years later, Brazil won. And then they won again in 62 and 70. And so you're 100% right. Even let's go back to hockey. And the second half of my youth, I was raised in Canada. And, if Canada doesn't win in hockey, it's another failure. If the U.S. doesn't win in basketball, or if Brazil doesn't win in soccer,
yeah.
you're right. And it's historic.
It is. And whereas for me, watching the U.S., I'm excited. Can we make it out of the first round, right? Will we make it out of the first round? And then we've had some great years where we've made it. I think, did we make it to the final four back in?
No, final 8.
Final 8, was that?
Final 8, yep.
2002, we made it back down to the final 8. And we lost to Germany in a game that we very well could have won. Like, game could have gone either way. They did not dominate us.
Correct.
Yeah.
I 1-0. And
right.
If you don't say this, soccer people who are a little older and remember it will be shouting about this. If you remember, Michael Ballack blocked a U.S. ball on the goal line with his arm, literally on the goal line that was going in. So Michael Ballack, the German star, let's say, got by with a handball on the goal line, which, of course, today, you can't sneeze and not be caught by VAR. But, and Germany had a lucky path to get that far. And the U.S. played, above their head with confidence. But the U.S. deserved everything they got.
Yeah.
I mean, minus the handball. But, I mean, they deserved to get there. They were amazing.
Yeah, they did well. And, that's kind of a good segue for us. We were going to talk about the topic for us with World Cup soccer was the leadership. And I'm first of all, this is not about criticizing the coach. This is not about, as a coach, I'm anytime someone criticizes the coach, I'm like, well, you really don't know. So we don't know what they're going through. And I think that what I've heard a lot of criticism of the U.S. national team, we're talking about that specifically. Pulisic and Way came out, and Way specifically said it's evil what these former players are doing, how bad they're talking about the players of the U.S. soccer. And he made a comment. He actually said, you guys haven't won anything either. But I felt like, in a way, no pun intended, but in a way, it's better to take the high road on those things, because the truth is we don't know what they're doing on the field. I assume if you're playing on the World Cup team, you're busting your butt every single day. You can't even get there without pushing really hard. Yet sometimes it feels like when they play, they don't have the intensity as the other team, which happens at every level on any day, like any given Sunday, any given Saturday. But specifically with the leadership, I'm not real familiar with the coach of the U.S. soccer team. So you're more familiar with him. Zico's kind of a wealth of knowledge when it comes to national, international soccer. But I'd love to hear your take on the coach, the pluses of him coming in, some of the challenges he's going to face, how you think he compares to like Berhalter, the last coach, who I felt like did some things really well. But yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Okay, so just a couple comments. Again, I'm not on the inside at all, right? And there are former U.S. national team players who are more on the inside than I am. They're also more emotional than I am about it, let's say, right? That's a fact.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
I remember this, Berhalter, all the criticism after the last World Cup about Berhalter. I have to say, the U.S. has this wonderful fighting spirit, but there's this little bit of naivete or arrogance. I know those sound like two totally different things, somewhat, let's say, in that if we had our very best players, if we had our very best this, if we had our very best this, we'd be winning the World Cup or what have you. This belief, this wonderful belief. But there can also be naivete to it, right? Everything's easy, and then you go to do it like, holy moly, this is easy, right? Mark Knopfler, the great guitarist of Dire Straits, man, he made me want to play the guitar. And then I picked it up and realized I can't even strum like with my. It's like, oh yeah, and I was playing 6 to 8 hours a day, and suddenly it's like it becomes hard, right? So you look at a manager who doesn't get to see his players every day. He just gets to prepare them for this tournament, sees them every couple months. Does that make sense? So here's the question: so many people threw Berhalter under the bus because it's easier to throw a manager than it is 25 players plus whoever, the next 15, 20 players who maybe played in some qualifying. It's easier to throw one guy under the bus, correct? So they threw him under the bus. Did he make mistakes? Every manager did. The problem is the media wants to share every single mistake that is made. So every mistake is, what is it, made grandiose, even bigger, correct? And I know he got into it with Reyna's son, right? And why didn't he play enough? And they got into a personal fight, right? Claudio Reyna's son. And then you bring in Pochettino, and he seems to be cold and not very American, whatever that is, I know, but not very American, let's say, whatever that is. Well, first of all, Pochettino wasn't exactly winning titles all over the world. He wasn't. It was just grass is greener on the other side, what have you. He was the sexy thing because, he's an Argentine, a former Argentine player, managed Tottenham City, managed PSG, Paris Saint-Germain. And so they brought him in. But now it seems like he doesn't have a connection at some level with the players. And the one thing I'll say about the U.S. is they sure seem like they love this communication, this contact, this what have you with their manager, right? And it seems like a manager needs to do that at the international level because you don't actually see your players daily, like a club. And then if you get a guy who's a little standoffish, which it sounds like Pochettino is, it makes it tough. So from a manager leadership perspective, it seems like he's got to connect with the players way more. And, this is his first national team he's managing, right? Before he's managing club every day. So he's actually learning how to manage a national team. And the U.S. is his first national team that he's managing, from what I know. His first big national team that he's managing, if that makes sense. And then, there's that management, our leadership. Then the next step is, of course, the leadership from the players. Who are the leaders on the field? Does that make sense? And so I think that get rid of Berhalter, and then you get what you asked for, right? Sexy manager from overseas, big club. And now, well, he doesn't really relate to American players. That's what you asked for. My opinion, Berhalter can't walk on water. The U.S. isn't quite as good as they think they are.
Yeah.
I said it's my opinion, but it's a fact.
Yeah. Well, I think that, what's interesting, and, you and I have talked about this in the past. One of the challenges for Brazil has been that their players are so disparate all over the world. They have 11 great players. I don't know if any of them play on the same professional team, or maybe at the most one or two. Their 11 stars might play. I have no idea, but I doubt it's many. Whereas Spain, their team, a lot of them play together year round, makes them stronger. A lot of the German players, I think, play in Germany, so they're there. And I think that's what hurt Brazil when Brazil's pro league became less, well, let's face it, had less money, had less pull. All the greatest players are going to Europe, right? So now, both Brazil and Argentina have a harder time bringing their players together than they did. So it's still amazing they do as well as they do in the World Cup, considering their players are all over the world and they hardly get together at all.
Correct. Let me comment on that because I might have
Yeah.
to pause my camera because I might tear up a little bit now. But here's the funny thing. Argentinians are pretty much the most European Latin Americans or South Americans. Uruguay is quite a bit like that too. But Argentina has this humongous connection with Italy, let's say. So many players like Messi, Lavetz, ending in I as their last name, correct? So many Argentines are like that. So what's amazing is that Argentina got to the final in 2014 and won this last World Cup. But in 2014, when Brazil hosted the World Cup, what people don't realize is this. 4 of Brazil's 23 players played in Brazil. You know who 2 of them were? The second string and third string keeper, who are never going to get on the field.
Yeah.
So of the possible players that really were going to get on the field, 2 played in Brazil. Now, Argentina, 3 of their 23 played in Argentina.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
when Spain won the World Cup, I'm trying to think the exact numbers, but I believe that something like 17 of their players in 2010 played in Spain. Typically, probably Barcelona and Real Madrid, right? Maybe throw in 1 or 2 Atletico, Valencia, and Sevilla players, maybe. Germany, 9 of the German players that won in 2014, the numbers I just told you about Brazil and Argentina, Germany, 9 of their players had been raised through the youth system and were playing in Bayern Munich on the same club, week in and week out on the same club. Those Brazilian players that I told you, 19 of the 23 were playing in Europe, and they were spread out. Man, this is a decade ago now, right? They were spread out in at least 10 different clubs. So that means maybe 1.9 of them played on each of the 10 clubs. At least 10 clubs. It might have been 11 clubs. So at max, you have 2 guys on the same club, probably, a club like Barcelona or Real Madrid.
Right.
So it's so difficult. Now, when Italy won the World Cup in 2006, all 23 Italians were playing in Italy.
Yeah.
Now, that can also get us to something else, but just to let you know, Germany's naturalized Brazilians, right?
Yep.
Sorry, I don't mean to make this a Brazilian thing. Italy's naturalized Brazilians and Argentines.
Yep.
If that makes sense. Spain's naturalized a ton of Brazilians. So it makes it, you're so right, so difficult to get this unity. Imagine 9 of Germany's 23 players play every single day at Bayern Munich.
Well, I know. I remember when I was going over getting my USSF B license down at TCU back in '94. Went down there for that. Went back a couple of weeks later to watch World Cup soccer and the Cotton Bowl. A couple of games there. We were working on.
You were in Fort Worth then. I was in Houston.
Yeah. So we were going over team defense, pressure, cover, balance, more zone, how to run a zone defense. And at the end of it, he asked the question, how many games do you think it takes for a team to get proficient at this style of defense? And we said, we don't know. He said, and I think the number he said was 26. It could have been something different. He said, which is the exact number of games we have in a college season, whatever it was. He was like, so if we're lucky, we take the whole college season to get synced on defense. And so it's so that is a big deal. And now a quick word about one of our partners. Hey, Kick 3v3 soccer fans, it's Danny here with a quick shout out and an amazing offer from our partners at Macron. If you don't know Macron yet, they're one of the largest suppliers of team uniforms to European clubs like Crystal Palace, Stoke City, and the famous Wrexham AFC. In fact, they've been expanding across the U.S. with a fantastic production facility in Connecticut. Zico and I got to visit the Connecticut facility personally, where we met with Alan and the production team. And let me tell you, they treat every club like champions. Whether you've got a couple hundred teams in your organization or thousands, they'll treat you like you're a big deal. It's that top-notch customer service that won us over. And thanks to folks like George Gurkinich, their U.S. rep, top-notch customer service is expected and delivered 100% of the time. If you mention Kick It 3v3 when you meet with George, And if you are a qualified prospect meeting with and accepting a proposal from Macron, your entire club will receive 10% off of the next Kick It 3v3 event you attend. So if your club needs high quality gear and a partner who truly cares, check out Macron. They are elevating the game for everyone. Visit kickitsoccer.com/Macron for details. That's Macron. And now back to the show. We said, we don't know. He said, and I think the number he said was 26. It could have been something different. He said, which is the exact number of games we have in a college season, whatever it was. He was like, so if we're lucky, we take the whole college season to get synced on defense. And so it's so that is a big deal. Which we look at the USA. I look at Pulisic. He's kind of quiet. He leads by example. He doesn't seem like a big talker. Well, who else is like that he can think of? A great player that isn't a big talker, leads by example. I would say Messi, right?
I was thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that kind of almost was a criticism of his until he finally won the World Cup with Argentina, that maybe he's not the leader they need. And, I know you as a team leader, you're much more vocal, Zico. You would be on the field dictating, talking to players the whole game. And we haven't had a lot of inspirational leaders on the U.S. team
lately. Yeah.
Lately, who was the bald guy that his dad was the coach and he was the central midfielder? Actually,
Bradley. Yeah.
I actually thought Bradley. I thought he was a pretty good leader. He grew into one over the years. I felt like he stepped up. We had a German that played on the team, also played for the Rapids for a while. Very aggressive player on the World Cup team. He seemed like he'd come in. He was a guy come in. I can't remember his name, but he would come in and just knock bodies around and change the dynamic of the game.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Do you remember that guy? I can't remember his name, but he had a big impact, and I felt like he was inspirational. Clint Dempsey, quiet but determined leader, especially when you hear his backstory. You want to get tears in your eyes.
Yeah, tough life.
Listen to his backstory. So I guess the question is, can Pulisic be that leader that they need? Is it sufficient to lead quietly and behind the scenes and not be this like Mahomes or Brady or even Gretzky, right? Gretzky was a vocal leader of his team. So I'm curious what your thoughts are and on that. Obviously, Maradona was a controversial leader. Pelé, he led a group of leaders, right? But yeah, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that with the lack of leadership, or maybe there isn't a lack of leadership with the U.S. national team.
Yeah, we've seen this psychological sort of breakdown in lectures or whatever about makeups of teams, let's say. Again, I'm going to refer to Canadian hockey is so great at it. You have a checking line, you have a creative line, you get chemistry or what have you, and there is such a thing as quiet leaders, obviously. And you know what? You got to be honest. Actions motivate. And I remember Maradona at halftime of the '86 World Cup. I was at the University of Manitoba watching it on a big screen TV in '86. So it was probably, what was it? Was it really high def, right? It was a little bit better than Pong or whatever that game where the things are, but it's the best we had then, right? And I remember hearing a story from an Argentine player who was in the locker room who said, you know what? Maradona stood up at halftime and said, we need one player to do one thing, to make one play, to create one moment. And I would be sitting there thinking, well, dude, that's you. You're the greatest player on the planet. Well, of course, Maradona did that. Okay. And the truth is, it's amazing how many times he took the ball, beat 4 or 5 players by himself, get afflicted here to that guy or that guy and that guy or that guy. They're world class. But I'm the greatest player who walks the planet, right? So that's pretty. So I think you can be a quiet, inspirational leader. Messi, quiet, inspirational leader. Let me throw a controversial point, and then I'll just say the psychological breakdown that we've heard before, okay? Here's a point. Pelé won 3 World Cups. I don't want to get off topic. Brazil was never given a penalty kick in those World Cups. Messi was in his 5th World Cup. Just happens that the year Messi wins the World Cup, in 7 games, they were awarded 5 penalty kicks. Let me ask a question. How well would the U.S. and Pulisic do if they were given 5 penalty kicks? in 7 games. Now, they might not make the 7 games, let's say, but give them a penalty kick in each of their first 3 games, right? Canada could have gotten a penalty kick, to go ahead 2-0 over Croatia in the last World Cup. So Messi did win it. He was 0 for 4 before that, and a wonderful player. But VAR has made it where if I sneeze on you, I make contact with you, it's penalty kick. That's a fact. So I think the other thing is Messi is Messi. I'm not ripping him. If you're a player ahead of the ball, an attacking player, if you're a creative player, you need to lead by your actions. Because at some point you need to break down defenses, beat somebody, do that. Incredible principles of attack. The last principle of attack is creativity or improvisation. If you're that quiet leader and you're ahead of the ball, you got to lead by your actions. If we notice, so many of the leaders tend to be big, powerful central defenders, fighters. Correct? Something I can always do? I can always fight. If I'm ahead of the ball and I'm relying on people to get the ball to me, what happens if we're playing a team that's a bit better? They can't get me the ball. I can't be the leader. What if it's rainy, horrible, windy, whatever, should the game be called? It's hard to be a leader like that. So being a quiet leader who's a creative leader is tough. But I can fight and battle in wind, in snow, in rain, in heat. Does that make sense? So the fight is always there. So I think so often we find that the leaders tend to be warriors. And so we've heard this before, right? There's the people who work hard and carry the piano, and there's the piano players. I think it's tough to be a leading piano player, especially when you play against a better team and your team doesn't have the ball a lot. Does that make sense? So I think it's tough for Pulisic because his team can't always get him the ball because the other team's better, let's say. And the few times he gets the ball against the better teams, he's got to make something happen. And then lastly, I'll say this. He's one of the players who refused to play last summer because he needed a break. I think not playing this past summer, just now because he needs a break, to be fit for the next summer makes sense.
Yeah.
That said, it's tough when you've got 6 or 7 guys who pretty much are guaranteed a spot.
Yeah.
How hungry are you? If that makes sense, right? But it does make sense when he says, man, I need a break.
Yeah.
Because I can't go 24 straight months into the next World Cup next summer, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So you want your leader to be hungry, but even your leader needs a bit of a rest. It's that fighting guy, central defender who's strong, who will say, I don't need a rest.
It's like being that, the Ray Lewis as opposed to this offensive tackle. It's hard to be the team leader.
Ray Lewis.
Yeah.
Great. Ray Lewis. As opposed to a wide receiver.
Right.
Who's the fastest, quickest wide receiver, but the offensive line needs to give time for the quarterback to get it to that receiver. So that's a great point. So Pulisic is 2, 3, 4, 5 passes down the road.
Yep.
And it's hard to lead if people start saying, well, he's not getting the ball. He's not getting the ball. He's not getting the ball. So what do you do if you're not getting the ball? You start to come deeper. You start to come deeper. You start to come deeper. And then when you're picking the ball up at a holding midfield position, let's say, and now you turn around and there's 8 players in front of you to quote unquote, get by eventually. You know what I mean? So does that make sense? So it's sort of like you can see Randy Moss play.
Right.
But if he doesn't have time to get up the field, because he's the deep threat, well, up the field is Pulisic, way up the field. Does that make sense?
That reminds me of a story you told me when you were playing in Manitoba, and you were by far the best player on the team, the high school team, and you probably should have been playing central midfielder, maybe even attacking. The thought was, well, we got to have our best player up there scoring goals, so let's put him at central midfield or let's put him at forward. And instead, what happened was when you play on a weak team, especially we're talking youth, high school, right back then, and you're central midfielder, you're watching a tennis match. You're watching the ball go over your head. That way, and go over your head that way.
Yep.
You're never getting the ball. And so to solve that, and I think you told me it was your brother's
Yep.
idea, and you were pissed that he recommended it.
Yep.
Pardon my
Well,
language, but you were irritated. He said, "We need Zico at right defender,
yep.
as he will get the ball a lot. He'll distribute it properly to the midfielders as needed, the forwards as needed. He'll create
Yep.
from right defender, and he'll also be able to make overlapping runs, create some, maybe cross the ball, maybe have some scoring opportunities." And I think that kind of,
I'll say this. I was
yeah,
skilled, but I wasn't the best. And I wasn't the
mm,
best because I was in a useless position, correct?
mm,
The guys who held that whole team together were two guys. I'm going to throw out some names: Omar
yeah,
Constant and Roy Head. And they were
right,
the two central defenders, meanest guys in Canada, north of the 49th parallel. And so my
yeah,
brother did throw me to the right-sided defender. But the understanding was, since it's kicked this way, kicked that way, when it's kicked this way, it comes to the defenders. And Roy never lost Omar never lost a header in his life. And
mm,
so what happened is they realized no one's going to be on your right side. So those two guys dominated almost from the left side all the way across to the right side because there was just a hole where I was. So you're 100%
mm,
right. So
yeah,
let's say I was more skillful, let's say, but the guys who allowed that were the warriors in the middle of the back, which was
right,
Omar Costa and Roy Head.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
no,
And we
yeah,
had a more talented team in 1987, but this was 89, and we had those two guys, and those two guys allowed me to get the ball a ton
yeah,
in an attacking role. So you're 100% right. Yeah.
yeah. Well, no, and I think that's interesting. You're right. It is, I played sweeper in college, stopper sometimes, and you did feel like in those spots you were kind of the team quarterback, or maybe linebacker is a better, you
And
were
they
the Ray
were.
Lewis. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you were, we had some game. We're leading, as a sweeper, I'm basically the guy making offside happen or not, making those decisions, talking to the team to step up. Sometimes it's the goalkeeper. It's a great leader because they can talk the whole game and keeps them engaged. But yeah, I think that might be part of it. Is Pulisic's a true kind of attacking player. He could probably step in and play central midfielder, but it would not be
Correct.
ideal for the team for him to play there. So leading from the front in soccer does not work.
Let me tell you something funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
As well as leading from the center or leading from the back, would be the kind of way to put that. Yep.
if you're a forward, you are the one guy on your team who is 90+% of the time facing backward.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah,
else is facing forward.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yep.
it's hard to
Exactly.
lead from the front. If you lead from
Yeah.
the front, like anybody, you sure pray that your team is better than the other team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why these great goal scoring forwards have to be brilliant. They're
Mhm.
only going to get the ball maybe 8 or 9 times and a half. They better finish one of them.
And the more brilliant they are, and this is what happens in every great sport. You talk about a wide receiver in NFL football, the best player on your basketball team, the best pass rusher in NFL, the best whatever. What's amazing is the greater you become, the more people are out to target you, take you down. I don't mean hurting necessarily, but take you out of the game mentally,
Game
physically.
plan around you.
Yep. And then when those great players even still rise above that, that's like going against the grain. That's like you have so much friction against you that it's hard to, I think, maintain that greatness. And as a forward, hey, if I can get the ball 8 or 9 times, if I'm a defender, I get the ball 100 times a game, even if it's just a lazy pass back because we're building the attack. I touch the ball 100 times a game. But when you're that forward, it's very challenging. I don't think I liked playing forward when I was a kid because I felt like I was in left field or right field. I had to wait to get the ball, bored out of my mind.
Hard with ADHD.
Yeah. So I loved playing sweeper, stopper, sometimes outside midfielder or attacking, back because you're always in the game. You could make stuff happen. Yeah, right? Come on, guys. Right? You make a tackle that turns the team around, that causes a transition. Yeah, so you block a shot that's just inspirational because
Yeah.
there's that. Yeah, it's a different mentality. We've never had that conversation before, so I appreciate it. Let's talk about. Do you have any predictions? I mean, besides, let's take Brazil and the U.S. out of it. When you think of who you would expect to do really well at this World Cup, that's not your team. Who do you think about and why?
Okay. Hate to say all these teams, but
Right.
Spain is on a roll. Germany, I think, is quietly improving. We'll see where France are. Those are the big teams that we typically hear. England, who knows? They've got a new manager, but they did well. Maybe despite Gareth Southgate for the last 6 years, they did well. We'll see how they do with the German manager, which is funny.
Yeah.
And then Argentina is going to be very good, probably. But you know what? Even Messi, let's say, Father Time is undefeated, and Messi's 4 years older. If he's given five penalty kicks, he might do it. But if he's not given five penalty kicks, it's going to be tough for them to win. But you have to think those four big European teams that I said, and Messi. I think a team like Croatia, who always, man, like they're 150-pound guys who knock around 200-pound guys. You know what I mean? Heavyweights,
Yeah.
but they don't have Modric. Which, by the way,
Right.
fun fact about Dan, his dog's name is Modric. So they've lost Modric,
Yep.
and Modric is this guy who's just, I don't know what it's called. Is it called an axle? All the spokes go into that one round thing on a tire.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
Modric was. And so I think it's going to be those four big European teams and Argentina. I could give you an argument for Brazil, and it could be slight desperation. And it's not based on Brazil alone as much as in 2002 for qualifying, Brazil had a nightmare. Nightmare. But they qualified and won it. Now they had such a talented team, but they had a nightmare in qualifying. In 2006, Italy had Calciopoli, which is, betting and bribing going on within the Italian Serie A. And they were just a mess. And they won it. And so there's been this history of teams that have been a bit of a mess happening to win it. Argentina, two or three qualifiers in a row, qualified once they had to go into playoffs to qualify, right? Once, if not twice. And in the last 3 or 4 times, they got to a World Cup final and lost, got to a World Cup final and won, if that makes sense. So teams that have had to battle to qualify have typically done really well, actually, and won the event, if that makes sense. Anyway, so I'd say those five first. My 2 cents. And I can add more.
Oh, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. All right. Yeah, and what's funny is I don't watch a whole lot of soccer, and I always tell people it's because when I watch soccer, it is I have to focus on the TV the whole time. I I can casually watch almost every American sport can be casually watched. Even NBA basketball has so many stoppages that you can casually watch it between the TV commercials and the timeouts and all of that. NFL football, 7 minutes or 7 seconds of action, 30 seconds of inaction, and baseball. But with football, with soccer, I can't just casually watch. So I like to go season tickets to the Rapids. I like going and watching a few games. I love the atmosphere and all of that. And then I kind of save it all up for World Cup soccer when World Cup soccer gets here.
Yep.
I watch more. I watch 4 years worth of soccer for me. But yeah, and it's just all being really busy. I don't have time to sit around
Life
and
can
watch.
get in the way, right? Life gets
Yeah.
in the way.
Yeah, I mean, would you rather, when I was younger, would I rather be watching soccer or playing soccer? I'd rather be playing soccer. Right now, would you
Yeah.
rather be watching soccer on TV or watching your kids play soccer? Right? You'd rather go play soccer with your kids and
My
do all
kids
of
are playing this week and in different tournaments. So yeah,
that. Yep,
100%.
yep, exactly. All right, so that's good predictions. I guess I'm just hoping that the U.S. Somehow gets it together by then, and we'll just see what happens. they dropped in the world rankings. I always think the world rankings are kind of silly because I'm like, I don't know how you can even do that. Now, a fun fact about, I've heard, you and I bought Kick It 3v3 Soccer a couple of years ago. We've heard, there's been pro players and national team players that have played Kick It 3v3 Soccer. We're not going to sit here and name them because we don't really know. We know personally. But the founder of Kick It 3v3 Soccer, Dan Kramer, one of the reasons he founded the company because he was an ex-professional basketball player from, I think, Norway, in Europe, but he was American born. Came and I think he was one of the founders of 3v3 Hoop It Up Basketball. And when he saw his daughter playing soccer, he wanted to support her, and that's how and then he started 3v3 Soccer to support her. She ended up starting central midfielder for the national team and the Olympic team, was a stud player, and now she's assistant head coach at BYU. So I know that's one claim to fame of one of our. I think she actually has a Wikipedia page, which I don't think either one of us have Wikipedia pages yet, and that's kind of a thing. But all right, so what we really want to talk about is we're going to talk about coaching 3v3, and in a way, coaching soccer in general. And the focus of today is going to be about age-appropriate coaching. And one of my first introductions to 3v3 soccer was when I think my daughter was 5 years old, and she's now 21. We had a really solid U16 put together, some girls playing this 3v3 tournament. Thought we had a lot of talent. We never played 3v3, in a tournament before. And I was almost appalled that how well our opponents were passing. They had set plays. They outplayed us. It was impressive. Were they better individually skilled? I don't know, but we weren't organized like they were. And so a layperson might have watched that game and went, wow, this team is so much better coached. Look at them. They're passing the ball. They're staying spread out. That's brilliant for 5-year-olds. So I would argue that was detrimental to those 5-year-olds, that they were being forced to play position and passing. And years ago, when you and I had our soccer training business, Soccer Fit, I summarized an article by the USSF psychiatrist, the United States Soccer Federation, or maybe it was the United States Youth Soccer Federation, Youth Soccer Association's team psychiatrist. And what he said I thought was fascinating, and this is what I think about soccer is fascinating, is that, when we're born, and I'm not quoting him by any means, but this is the general gist of everything. We're born, we're very selfish people. We're about survival. We literally can't see anything but a blur 10 feet from our face. And my granddaughter was born last week, so I'm just thinking about this, looking at her. She's basically a vegetable at a week old, looking at me, kind of reacting to light, but she can't see. And it's about survival. And when they get to 4 or 5 years old, I guess I would say it this way: you can drill 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds over and over again, just drill it into them to spread out, give supporting angles, have team shape and all of that. But the problem is you miss the opportunity to teach them what they are going to have the easiest time learning at that time, what they're going to get the most growth in, which is individual skills, controlling, dribbling, shooting, passing, all of those things. And if you force them to get their head up and only look around the field to make that pass, they might be outplaying their opponent. They might be smarter than their opponent at 5 years old, but they are not. It's almost detrimental to their development as a player. And I always will tell people, if you were hell bent on making sure your child could walk at 6 months, that was your number one goal, you might be able to achieve that with some kids. That doesn't mean it was the right thing for them, right? They were meant to start walking at 10 or 12 months, right? Because there's other things they're learning and working on at 6 months. And if your focus was to make them walk, you might succeed at them walking. Doesn't mean they're going to be the fastest kid in 6 years, running. And so what I'll end on this, and then maybe I will, who knows? But what I loved about what the gist of what this article said, and I should cite it better than this and talk about it. But as we mature as soccer players, in a lot of ways, it parallels how we mature as humans.
100%.
Uh, we when we're little, we're very selfish, very self-centered, just as part of a survival. And hopefully, by the time we're 18, we've matured a bit and we become more empathetic at
Yeah.
at 18 than we were at 5. And so, if you look at that when you're teaching the young kids, let's focus on the individual. One of the reasons it's 3v3 with no goalkeeper is because what we really want it to be is 1-on-6. We want those kids to get the ball. In fact, when I coach my girls at U6, under 6, when they're playing 3v3, my would tell each player, get the ball and go score. That's what we want you to do. Get the ball and go score. I would work a bit on when we lose the ball, let's get goal side of the ball. I'm not even talking about marking a man. I would train my players when we lose the ball, let's all three get goal side of the ball. And I would teach them what goal side was because they could go, oh, I'm in between the ball and the goal. That's not a bad point of reference to learn at 4 or 5 years old. And they're still going to get that wrong.
Mm.
But if I have all three of my players getting, in fact, this is what's funny. I'll even go more. I would argue, I would tell my three players the whole game, you should be goal side of the ball. When we have it, when we don't have it. Because if you think about it, if I'm one of my players and I get the ball and I'm dribbling, I literally would say, okay, so where do the other two players go? Get behind that player because he's probably going to lose the ball. And when he does, you're going to be there to pick it up.
Yep.
And then his job's to get behind you. So we kind of almost had like this train, rotating who's the caboose and how we played 3v3 soccer. But I was not going to waste time on spreading out and whatever. And then the last thing I did was kick-ins. I thought, this is ridiculous. I'm not teaching passing. And and when we have a goal kick, I'm looking at my player. He got to take a goal kick. And she doesn't know what to do. I got to pass now. Coach said, I'm not even passing. All of a sudden, I'm passing. So we just did every kick-in at that age, like the old school kickoffs, where two people get right next to the ball. I touch it to them.
Not that far.
Yeah. And now game's on. And I don't worry about the stress of passing and whatever. And I felt like that. And I mostly did this with my youngest girls because I learned by the time they were coming up that was the focus on. And then when we got to 7, 8 years old, now we start introducing 2-on-1, right? So I have the ball, and still the focus is, what's your objective when you get the ball, Susie? Is it to pass? No, it's to score, right? So if you get the ball and there's nobody between you and the other team's goal, you're going to go score. But if someone does get in your way, well, now you have an option. You can try and beat them, or if Julie is over there, maybe that's an option. But I'm still not telling them what to do. I'm introducing those ideas because they got to learn how to make those decisions on their own. And so I guess that's the biggest mistake I see coaches making at these younger ages. And the sad truth is, the guys that win those U8 3v3 championships, U7 3v3 championships, a lot of times because they're maybe focusing a little too much on the passing and not just sticking to the dribbling and all of that. Anyway, so that's my high horse. I'll leave it on one thing, and then I'll be done. I want to hear your opinion on this, Zico. Is that it's been wonderful to see how many parents grew up playing soccer now and love to step in and help coach their kids. And you and I, since the 90s, have been coaching parent coaches on how to be better teachers for their kids. The challenge is when we're an adult who played soccer, maybe our whole lives, we don't really remember how we could have or should have been coached when we were 5, 6, and 7. Right. We just remember high school practice.
100%.
Right? And so now we show up at our first 5-year-old practice and we're trying to run it like we're running a high school practice or a college practice. And it's not even the same sport. It's not even, so it's almost not even the same sport. But this is something that you and I have always believed in and been very, on the same page about, and also have had to make compromises when there's pressure to win games at younger ages that maybe we didn't even want to make because we realized if we don't work on passing a bit, we're going to get blown away and our club's going to suck.
Right.
Anyway, so I touched on a lot there, but yeah, I just want to get your feedback and maybe we'll wrap it up here in a minute.
Awesome. Wow. You are on your high horse, and I will take it over. This is the Pony Express of coaching young kids. I will take it over. So here's the thing, we're a facilitator the younger they are. And you're totally right. The way we should be coaching kids is the way we develop as humans. So they're selfish, they're egotistical, right? They cry if they don't get something at 5 years old or 6 years old, even. They cry if they don't get something. Yeah. When that magic practice time comes, 4:30, we expect them to reason and think and calculate multiple things. Here are a few things about how kids' minds and bodies work. They're single task oriented. At any given point, I have these 5 kids in front of me right here. I don't want that in front of my face. You people might, but there's these 5 kids right here. And I'm making a coaching point to them. And at least 2 or 3 of them have their finger 2 knuckles up their nose and making full eye contact with me. Here's my question. Be socially aware. Are kids socially aware? No. What they want, when they want, right? And what I'm saying is this. Are these 5 kids tactical people when 2 or 3 of the 5 are picking their nose and making full eye contact? No. So first of all, you're a facilitator, which means what? You don't need to know a ton about the game. You need to facilitate where they're at right now. So there's a saying that I love. You're not the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side. So we're guiding them. And we're guiding them to the fact that they're individuals. So like you mentioned, Dan, I've always said it. What's a 3-on-3? It's a 1-on-5. And if my teammate Dan with the blue shirt would get out of my way, the goal is open. But you know what? I would rather go with get the ball than spread out, get open, and pass the ball. Because when we don't have the ball, you got to get the ball. But then when we have the ball, we've got to totally shift and get open. Man, that's intense stuff, man. That is intense stuff. And then you mentioned drills. I agree with you. Let me tell you why that guy's drills worked when he kicked your butt really badly, and I know it still makes you bitter 30 years later. Let me tell you why his drills worked. I'll tell you right now. The saying is drills kill skills. Because drills are imitate what the coach set up. How many times do we set up a cone? You're going to pass to that line, run to that cone, loop around it, and finish in the back of that line while this guy plays the ball. It's unrealistic. Drills kill skills, correct? And pass the ball is 2 people being in conjunction with one another. We call it parallel play. 2 5-year-olds are in the sandbox. They're not exchanging. I took that bucket because it was near me. Now, Dan might have had the bucket, but I took that bucket because it was near me. So it's called parallel play. They have the same blue shirts. They're in the same sandbox, but they're not playing together. That's just a fact. You know what I mean? This is why it worked. Beth and I coached a phenomenal U9, U10 girls team. Phenomenal. I've told you this before. They're the best in the state. Phenomenal. But if I look at it, there were so many of them that were younger siblings. Now, some coaches are over the top and they sort of recruit and they If he's coaching 7 kids and 6 of them are younger siblings, you look at your 7 kids and I bet you 5 of them are the oldest sibling. That's just a fact. And so that can work. The other thing is a pass is going to be the whole team because kids are what? They're concrete. Go get the ball. I run the ball. He makes a 7-yard pass. But I'm going to go back to this. His success was usually you have more younger siblings than the other guy. Because the truth is this. Most people are average. But something that gets you ahead early on is having younger siblings instead of older siblings. Does that make sense?
Well, are you saying that, let me interrupt you here. Are you saying that younger siblings help the older siblings be better soccer players or the other way around?
Younger siblings learn from the older siblings.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Jumped in and played in goal in a couple practices like 7.
Right.
They've been beaten up by, so He had
Yeah.
typically this is when my team kicks your tail. There's a very
Yeah.
good chance at 7 years old that six of
Yeah.
my kids are younger siblings who have gotten a
Gotcha.
beating and
Yeah.
chased older siblings, where
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
of your kids are younger who have chased older.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, no. Oh, yeah. I've seen that many times over the years where the younger sibling has to fight a little bit harder to compete with their older brother and all different kinds of things. It can go different ways. My oldest son, Tyler, he was born right after I turned 20. I was a kid still playing soccer. I think it's funny. I think sometimes young college professional soccer players that have kids young, that first kid is almost like that younger sibling because you're playing soccer with them every day. You're knocking them around. You're not only that, you're a little more driven than you should be at 22, 23,
Yep.
24
Yep.
to live vicariously through your 3-year old at the time. And
Let me
I
say,
probably put, yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I interrupted, but let me say one more thing. Well,
Yeah.
what we want to do when we have young kids is from day one is start creating decision makers are problem solvers. Because it is the thing about this basketball timeout. How many timeouts are in basketball? Is it 5.5 or 3.5? Holy
I don't
moly.
know.
How many quarters? So I get quarter breaks. I get all these timeouts, and the
Yeah.
coach tells this guy gets 8 million a year, this guy gets 6 million a year, this guy gets 15.1 million a year. And I'm going to tell you, as a guy in a suit, exactly what you're going to do. So if you look at so many of North American, but American sports, basketball, developed by a Canadian, is coach centric. Football, coach centric. Baseball, coach centric. This means bunt. This means don't even swing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Ball, whatever. Right? I don't want to get too much into baseball tactics because I don't know. Soccer, you know what, dude? I don't have the throat. Like the closest kid to me is 14 yards that way, and he doesn't have the ball. The guys, that I need to correct are 61 yards away. So our beautiful game is player centric. So our activity should be player centric. And let me tell you one last thing. Last thing, I promise. Have one ball per player in your practices. And my younger brother and I used to say this. He's a brilliant coach. Tito and I used to say this. And we wrote this up. And honestly, a lot of parents are like, what? We're trying to teach them differently. We told them in our presentation of our program in 99, 2000, 2001, we told them, we want to make your child a ball hog and a show off. In practice, you won't share the ball because in games, you don't get the ball. You look at the greatest hockey players on the planet, they play 60 minutes. How much ice time do they have? 18 minutes out of 60. How much time do they have the puck? 1 minute and 4 seconds out of those 18 minutes. When you do it, you better be brilliant. So when we have kids who are single task oriented, what is a single task? Get the ball. So we at a young age, when they're selfish, make them a ball hog and a show off. They're going to start to get socialized at U9 and U10. They will get socialized to start passing. That can wait.
Yep. Yeah. You're just, yeah. And I would also, even the little things like with a 5-year-old trying to force them to use the inside of their foot to pass the ball. That's a hard position to put your body in.
Yep.
And that's an easier skill to learn later. Instep drive outside of the foot are harder to learn because it's a smaller surface. So even the little things like mostly focusing on instep drive passes when they're really little, outside the foot touches, passes, helps take advantage of where they are, and you're developing where they are rather than trying to force them to be someplace they're not. And you might have success forcing them to be someplace where they're not ready physically or psychologically, but at the expense of getting them really good at what they could be really good at right now. And it's much harder. I know this because when I did go play with the Kansas City Attack in the NPSL, I was an American player with okay skills or whatever, very good athlete. And the coach wanted me to instep drive the ball 40 yards on a dime. That was our attacking tactic. I was a right defender, knock the ball to my right, drive a 40-yard, instep drive, 80-mile-an-hour pass down to the corner for my speedy forward to run onto. And I went, you want me to what? With my instep? That's a harder skill. And I developed it, man. I was at the gym for during those tryouts and playing with that team. I'd be at the gym in between our two-a-days working on my instep drive because I realized that as an American, I didn't really have a good instep drive or outside the foot. And I got a lot better. But I noticed with my son when he was 2 years old, instep drive, piece of cake for him because that's just what he learned on. And then as you get older, you control your body, you can open up your body, you can turn in the inside of the foot, makes sense. But so there's so many things we do wrong with these younger kids because we're remembering what we focused on in high school, which was, hey, use the inside of your foot for an accurate mid-range pass. You'd be done to try and use the instep drive. That's a low percentage.
Totally.
Use that for shooting.
Totally.
And so this is kind of a good segue into, 3v3 soccer. So you said something that was key was that in a game, a full-size game, we rarely touch the ball, right? We're talking about a hockey player, 18 to 16 minutes. They're getting, if they're lucky, they're touching the ball 30% of the time. And that's a lot less than 11v11 soccer. It's probably for a lot of players, I don't know, 1 to 5% of the time. I'm sure there's a stat there we could look up. But when I talked about what changed my life as a player with small-sided games, because now instead of going to some practice where the dad really had to stand in lines for 90 minutes for that one chance to cross the ball and maybe knock it in. Now, as coaches, we use small-sided soccer because I am learning how to be composed in front of the goal to score. I'm always have to be ready because on 3v3, I'm always involved in the game, even providing supporting angle, or I'm going to get the ball. I'm going to get the ball, a lot more. So it's a very good developmental. That's why we use it in practices, but it's also good as you get to be 8, 9, 10, 12, even 16. I would say when you start to get 18, 19, or 20, it's just fun to play 3v3 soccer because you get a lot of touches and scores. But if you're not organized, you get your butt kicked, no matter how good your team is, if you don't get it quickly organized tactically. So 3v3 really accelerates the technical skills that you have to have in this small space, but also tactical awareness, transition we talk about. And we'll get into more of these topics in the next, in the coming weeks with our podcast. We'll get go a lot more deep into these things. But the bottom line is, with the younger kids, it's forcing the passing is going to be counterproductive. And I'll leave it with one thing. I love what you said about American sports being coach centric, and it frustrates the crap out of American family, parents sometimes. Why isn't the coach yelling at them to do this? They should be. It's like the coach did all the work at the practice. The game's just kind of steering the ship a little bit.
Yep.
But if you find yourself coaching soccer, and you haven't coached soccer before with young kids, the number one tip I would give you is you probably understand basketball growing up as an American. In basketball, what are the 3 things a player does with the ball? They dribble the ball, they shoot the ball, or they pass the ball. They never throw the ball arbitrarily in one direction. Almost never, right? In fact, I think they might even get a they're not supposed. You would never tell a young basketball player, throw it that way, and then we'll all run down there and see who gets it, right? That's just not how you would coach basketball. And I think that coaching soccer that way, if you just started at that foundation, you'd be developing soccer players, which is that's always that kind of development is always winning, but winning the game is not always development. And I was glad to hear in the last couple of years they started with the young kids. I don't know if they were doing this nationwide, but now they can dribble the ball out of the back, right? Just like in basketball, they're not allowed to full court press at U8 and under, or I don't know, when I was a kid, we weren't allowed to full court press because that'd be the best offensive weapon is full court pressing, because half the kids can't even inbound the basketball without it would be intercepted like 50% of the time. So maybe because if nothing else, I've got my back to this, it's harder to make that inbound pass. So they created a rules finally in soccer where now kids can get their composure. They can get to the offensive maybe 2/3 offensive half unchallenged, and now the game is on. So they're starting to realize changing the rules to be more conducive to coaches coaching for skill development rather than winning at the early age. So anyway, we could talk about that for decades. It's been our mantra, and I always tell people, and don't get me wrong, you never will have met two more competitive soccer players than me and Zico on the field when we were playing at the level we like to play at. We hated to lose, right? We always were fighting to win, but that should not be the focus. At 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, winning the game. And I used to think parents wouldn't buy into that, but when I've coached kids for 2 or 3 years, you've seen and I've seen the parents buy into that. They realize, they see, well, my sons, we lost that game, but my son's way better this week than he was last week. And so you can, as a coach, train your parents, educate your parents on what hey, I'm looking out for you guys. And if the parent doesn't appreciate, that's kind of on them. They're probably not going to be a parent who keeps their kid on your team for that long because
Right.
they're focused on the wrong thing. Right.
Sure.
So yeah, that's us on our high horse here. Now, we want to wrap things up. Please check out Kick It 3v3 Soccer, our website. It's actually kickitsoccer.com. And you can check out our schedule coming up. We're adding more tournaments right now. We're going to be adding a bunch of tournaments for spring, summer. We're getting those much earlier on the schedule this year. We're hoping to get something out in Dallas before the end of the year, possibly Alabama before the end of the year. We certainly have a few tournaments coming up here in Colorado. With when this airs, we may have just had our Colorado Springs kind of August tournament, but we have up in Conifer, Colorado, we're going to have our Halloween tournament this year again. And
Oklahoma City is yeah.
I almost forgot. Oklahoma City, October 4th. We're excited to work with them. Just working with a great club. What's the name of the club? And because you've been working much more closely with the Oklahoma City guys than I have.
Well, I'm not sure the club name, but it's with Brandon Malloy. And
Yep.
He hooked us up. He contacted us, and we worked out Oklahoma City for the 4th.
Yeah, you know what? It's right there behind you on the thing. It's NWOSC, I think. And so that we should probably have that because we do want to give him a shout out. Let's see. Not now. I'm Googling it. NWO Soccer Oklahoma City. Yes. So it's a great club there. They came to our event in Tulsa, loved it.
Yep.
And now they're having us out there. So,
and we're with Dallas Surf on the weekend of December 2021. They're going to choose Saturday or Sunday. They're going to choose Saturday.
Gotcha.
Sunday. They're getting back to us. So that weekend, if you're in Dallas, again, it's the weekend, December 20 or 21.
And it won't be quite as wonderful as it was in mid-June. It's a little warm. Crazy heat in Dallas. So check that out. Yeah. And then there's a couple of places we have our indoor New Year's Eve, Eve Day tournament in Denver. And we're also having a soccer camp, in the mornings and the soccer tournament in the afternoon. So that'll be through our Zico FC soccer training business. So check that out. Again, please follow us on YouTube so you always get our latest things. I think we'll be in a rhythm of 1 to 2 a week for a while here, which we're really excited about coming up with a big year. They're going to have some nice interviews with people that we think will be exciting for you to get to know and meet, who are kind of legends in soccer. So we'll be doing that. But check us out at Kick It 3v3 Soccer on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to us. Our Facebook is Kick It 3v3, and our Instagram is Kick It 3v3 Soccer. So thank you guys so much. We're excited to kick this off. We got a lot we want to share with you and help you. We're going to introduce you to some other people and just hopefully really help promote the sport of soccer, be entertaining for you guys, and help you be better coaches and/or players. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Kick It 3v3 Soccer podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Kick It 3v3 Soccer or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Facebook at Kick It 3v3 and Instagram at Kick It 3v3 Soccer. And for the latest schedules and information about 3v3 action throughout the U.S., visit kickitsoccer.com. Big shout out to our sponsors. Macron and SmartWave Solar. We couldn't do all this without you. And of course, our Kick It 3v3 customers. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for you and the children, the parents, the families, the coaches that enjoy Kick It 3v3 soccer. Until next time, keep the ball moving, and we'll see you on the pitch. And now some special offers from our partners. Hey, Kick It 3v3 soccer fans, it's Danny here with a quick shout out and an amazing offer from our partners at Macron. If you don't know Macron yet, they're one of the largest suppliers of team uniforms to European clubs like Crystal Palace, Stoke City, and the famous Wrexham AFC. In fact, they've been expanding across the U.S. with a fantastic production facility in Connecticut. Zico and I got to visit the Connecticut facility personally, where we met with Alan and the production team. And let me tell you, they treat every club like champions. Whether you've got a couple hundred teams in your organization or thousands, they'll treat you like you're a big deal. It's that top-notch customer service that won us over. And thanks to folks like George Gurkinich, their U.S. rep, top-notch customer service is expected and delivered 100% of the time. If you mention Kick It 3v3 when you meet with George, and if you are a qualified prospect meeting with and accepting a proposal from Macron, your entire club will receive 10% off of the next Kick It 3v3 event you attend. So if your club needs high-quality gear and a partner who truly cares, check out Macron. They are elevating the game for everyone. Visit kickitsoccer.com/Macron for details. That's Macron. Soccer families, we all know that soccer expenses add up. So here's a way to save at home and help your soccer team. We're partnering with SmartWave Solar, serving Colorado and Utah only, because they make going solar simple with 2 quick online meetings and a free, no-pressure quote. How do I know? I just recently had my SmartWave solar system installed. I've been looking to add solar to my house for years, but I was tired of the misleading ads and those high-pressure, you have to decide today sales tactics. A friend of mine who'd had SmartWave Solar for 2 years and was super happy introduced me to SmartWave just a few months ago. SmartWave didn't use any high-pressure tactics. They saved me 40% over the other quotes I got and made sure I received all the tax incentives I was due. And here's the kicker. When you book a meeting with their local rep, Steve, through Kickit, SmartWave will help sponsor your team by covering 50% to 100% of your tournament fees, or provide 3v3 custom Macron uniforms for your next 3v3 tournament. Learn more and book your meeting with Steve at kickitsoccer.com/solar. That's kickitsoccer.com/solar, spelled SOLAR. Make sure you tell them that Dan from Kickit sent you.